Hello, I'm Charles Bowman, and welcome to this, our latest episode of Off the Agenda. And today we're at the Law Society, a London-based institution that has represented and governed solicitors in England and Wales since 1825. And I'm delighted to be joined by the current president of the Law Society, Stephanie Boyce, who has had an extraordinary and impressive career in both the law and legal services. She started that career in private practice before navigating to the Bar Council as a solicitor. She's a fellow of the Chartered Governance Institute, a commissioner at the National Preparedness Commission, a trustee at LawWorks, a member of the Thomson Reuters Transforming Women's Leadership in the Law Advisory Board, and a member of the HM Treasury Bays and the City of London Corporation's Socio-Economic Task Force. She's chair of the Independent Education Appeal Panel at Buckingham County Council, honorary professor of the Dixon Poole School of Law, King's College London, and in 2021 and 2022 featured on the Power List 100 Most Influential People in the UK in politics, law and religion. And this year, in 2022, she was the winner of the Inspirational Role Model Award at the Burberry British Diversity Awards. But perhaps most significantly, she made history when in 2021 she became the 177th President of the Law Society, making her the first black and the first person of colour to be appointed to this role. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Stephanie Boyce to Off the Agenda. Stephanie, welcome. And can I say it's a delight to meet you today. Welcome to Off the Agenda, and thank you so much for being our guest today. I'm going to start by taking you all the way back to the beginning, if I may. Your mother was born on the island of St. Vincent, and at the age of 15 in 1967 came across to the UK. Your father indeed had come across from Barbados 3 years earlier. You were born in Aylesbury, and your mother raised you as a single parent at that moment in time. What were those early memories, those early childhood experiences like? Growing up in your community, what were the challenges and opportunities that presented themselves at that time?
Well, can I say firstly, thank you very much for having me, inviting me to be a guest. But thinking back to my childhood, and just from some of my earliest recollection, growing up in a single parent household because my parents had separated by the time I was 4 years old, was that, it was a communal meeting place, if you like, on a Sunday where family, friends would gather over good food. And I just remember the conversations that flowed over the table in terms of what was going on around the world, what was going on in our own communities, and some of those injustices that people spoke about that was happening domestically and globally, but also just that reminiscing for home, and home being, for the elders in the community, the Caribbean, and the life that they had been left behind, the life they had left behind, but the stories that they told. And I just remember, because I grew up in an era where children were seen but not heard, and just listening behind the door, in the corner somewhere, just listening to the richness of those stories. But definitely remembering that as a child growing up in a single parent household, of sort of those financial challenges that a single parent household would bring. But just remembering that there was still that richness of conversation and just the love and supportiveness of the community.
Fantastic. And referencing family, you have a younger brother, Emerson Boyce, who is a professional footballer, was a professional footballer, and now coaches the Barbados national women's team. And I'm keen to understand the nature of the relationship you had as a child growing up with siblings and your younger brother, and the extent to which you provided a sense of influence in his own career path.
Absolutely. So yes, Emerson is one of two younger brothers that I have, and we share the same father. So we didn't live in the same household growing up, but certainly when I saw him at the weekends and on holidays, and there's 7 years between he and I. And he'd always, from a young age, had a talent for initially cricket and then switched to football. But of course, Emerson went away at quite a young age to football academy, football school. But later in life, when we'd reconnect after I came back from America, and watching his career as it progressed, and always being on hand to give that older sister advice as to how he could navigate the choppy waters, if you like, of football.
Fantastic. In your own teens, you relocated to the US, not unlike one of our earlier guests, Jackie Wright, and you lived there for 6 years before returning to the UK to study law. And I'm keen to understand the nature of the difference between the educational system that you experienced in the US to that you previously experienced within the UK, and also what were the motivations that took you towards studying law?
I think, as I've said previously, in as much that, the US being taken from rural Buckinghamshire, as it was at that time, to initially an American military base, and being engrossed in that society, that culture, which was all new to me, but also seeing the difference in treatment through rich and poor and those who had a different colour of their skin. I was taken back by some of those challenges, some of those obstacles, absolutely overwhelmed by it. And I think, at times that's what absolutely drove me from my experience in high school to the taking the school bus in, kids who lived in the poorer neighbourhoods, including myself, were bussed in into school where the other kids, would drive in because they lived a lot closer, but interestingly would drive in and, could turn up when school was about to start as opposed to being kept waiting outside for an hour or so. But I think it was those different experiences that I saw just absolutely drove me to wanting to make a difference, and felt that law was, and something that I'd wanted to do from such a young age, that law was a tool, an instrument to be able to affect that change and make that difference.
That's a great answer. And of course, you came back, you gained an LLB from London Guildhall University in 1999, and then the LLPC from the College of Law in Guildford, and were admitted as a solicitor in 2002. And I'm quite keen to understand the nature of your experience, that journey through to that professional qualifications, and again, some of the challenges, impediments, opportunities that presented themselves throughout that journey.
Well, as you said, having spent 6 years in America and graduated from American high school, my ambition was always to return to this jurisdiction, England and Wales, to study law. But I came up against my first obstacle was that my American high school diploma was not recognised here at that time. So I had to take a conversion course, if you like, doing part-time over 2 years, the higher qualification route into education that allowed me to then go on to university, part-time initially, when I entered London Guildhall in 1999, and then subsequently going on to do the legal practice course, as you said. And then, the training contract again was, another hurdle. My father happened to be in the right place, perhaps at the right time. And, by virtue of the fact that somebody else had dropped out and wasn't able to take that contract, I went along and had an interview, and I was successfully awarded the training contract. But again, once I finished training, conveyancing was the boom of the day. I wanted to be a litigator, so I left where I had trained with no job to go to. So having qualified as a solicitor, a mountain of debt, but no job to practice as a solicitor with. So I embarked on doing a few gardens and other jobs, to pass the time until I got my first post-qualification job. But then again, having done that for Within 2 years, I'd been made redundant twice in as many years. And then I decided I wanted to come into the City of London to practice. I just remember my recruitment agent telling me that because I hadn't trained in the city, I hadn't worked in the city, practiced in the city, it was unlikely that I'd get into the city, and that my salary expectation was unrealistic. I didn't listen to her. I got myself a different agent, one who shared my dreams, and subsequently landed my first job in the city with the General Counsel of the Bar in 2004. And then that has been that started off my in-house career, and I've gone on to work for a number of organisations. But I joined Law Society Council in 2013 to represent the Women Lawyers Division. And within 2 years of being on council, I put myself forward for the first time as a DVP candidate. And four attempts later, I was successfully elected as Deputy Vice President in 2019.
Fantastic, and I'm going to come on to that in just a second, and that's an extraordinary story. And within all the mix of this career path, you are a director yourself of your own company, Stephanie Boyce Consulting Limited, and that as a consultancy advises on not-for-profit management and governance more widely. Again, what types of activity and organisations do you work with in that context?
So it's fair to say that the company's been dormant since I took up my post as Deputy Vice President in 2019. But before that, I'd worked with a number of professional bodies, membership bodies, a number of religious organisations as well. But quite rightly in governance, which I hold a master's in, but going into organisations, doing their governance reviews, change management. So that has fueled my appetite to then go on to become a fellow of the Chartered Governance Institute. But a real passion for governance. But as I say, having not worked in the consultancy since 2019, because I've absolutely devoted myself to being Deputy Vice President and then Vice President and President full-time, because a remarkable opportunity.
And it's an incredible achievement. So as you say, in 2019, Deputy Vice President, the Society's Vice President in 2020, and then its President in March 2021. And can you tell us a little bit more about the role and responsibilities of being the President of the Law Society, and reflecting back, were there sort of key moments before that that helped you to this particular point?
Well, absolutely, inasmuch that, as I say, 4 attempts that it took me to get here. And I don't view those previous attempts as, I didn't succeed in those previous attempts, but for me, they weren't failures. I don't like the word failure. That, for me, has a negative connotation to it. They were 3 attempts to try again and to perfect, to hone my offering. And as I say, to try it again. After 4 attempts, I was successfully elected. And I'm quite open about the fact that, if I needed to go a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, I would have kept going. Such was my belief and determination in getting to this position. And as I say, it's an absolute privilege, a remarkable opportunity to be here, to serve my profession as president. And it's a remarkable platform to achieve change, to make a difference.
And can you take us through a typical day as the President of the Law Society? Is there such a thing?
I'm not sure there is, especially over the last year or so. My tenure has presided over a number of world crises. In terms of what the war in Ukraine, Afghanistan, the situation in Afghanistan, the pandemic, but equally, the challenges that the legal profession faces in terms of becoming a more equitable profession, and the role that the president plays as the president of the Law Society is in terms of being an ambassador for the profession, but being able to influence in terms of some of the conversations with government, from other stakeholders, but to galvanise our profession as the Law Society did, around when it was proposed that the Solicitors' Indemnity Fund, which of course is the insurance, if you like, for solicitors and for members of the public, would close. The way we were able to galvanise the profession behind our skin and get the Solicitors Regulation Authority to not close the fund, but to extend it for a further year.
Indeed, and you recently, in terms of that advocacy and influence, you recently hit out at the MOJ, the Ministry of Justice, after the new figures showed that there are still more than 58,000 Crown Court cases waiting to be heard, and in many cases, the victims looking and waiting long years to see justice being done. What more needs to be done? What's the nature of the influence that you provided to government to help and support and make sure that this doesn't continue?
Well, absolutely. The backlog in the court system is of deep concern to the Law Society. When we talk so much about ability to access justice. And when we have a backlog, there is delay in the system for the defendant, for witnesses, for victims who are having to wait for their opportunity, for their day in court, either to clear their name or to get the justice they deserve. And the backlog, so the government's ambition to get that backlog down to 53,000 by 2024, we feel that there needs to be greater investment, greater ambition to get that backlog down far further than the 53,000 proposed. And that will take significant investment from the government, and not only just in the justice system, but in terms of the infrastructure around the court system, in terms of buildings, in terms of judges, practitioners who practice within the court system to enable the justice system to continue to thrive.
And you promoted within all of that the criticality and importance of the rule of law, explaining that it is one of our country's strongest assets and indeed a competitive advantage, commercially and otherwise, for the UK. But respecting the fact that we need to invest in it, as you put it, can you talk us a little bit more about the nature of that investment, what it looks like, what it feels like on the ground, to ensure that we retain that jewel in the crown, our rule of law?
Well, absolutely. The rule of law is fundamental. It's one of the pillars of our democracy. Our justice system is revered around the world. People come here, clients, individuals come here, organizations come here to litigate. But our criminal justice system and parts of our civil justice system is in crisis. And that means that the government must invest. And if, for instance, I take the criminal justice system, there has been no real significant increase in fees to defence practitioners in almost 25 years. I know of no other profession where people have worked for that long with no pay increase. And it's not just the fees, it's the whole system. The investment is needed in the whole system, the infrastructure of that. So as I said previously about the judges, the people who work in the system, court buildings, where we've heard stories about the infrastructure of the court buildings, the court estates, leaking roofs and courts not being operational because the heating isn't working. But we're also seeing an ageing profession from the defence practitioner perspective. The average age for a defence practitioner is about 50 years of age. But not only that, some parts of the country where you will struggle to get a legal practitioner to represent you in court. And that is a real concern for us as the Law Society, but indeed should be a real concern for us as a nation, as a country.
And in the context of that shortage of judges and prosecutors, as you say, the criticality of opening up positions and career paths for the younger generations, how can we help and facilitate that happening in today's day?
So what we've seen of late is in the last spending review, the government has set out that it's prepared to invest in training contracts to get individuals going into the criminal justice system. But what we're clear is that the government must invest in the entire system. There is no point investing in training contracts to train people to come into a system that may no longer be there or worthy of its name. So Sir Christopher Bellamy conducted an independent review of the criminal legal aid system and called for a bare minimum of 15% increase in fees to defence practitioners. And of course, there are some parts where we have seen the government pledge that 15%, and it's welcome. But what that means for solicitors is not the bare minimum 15%, but overall 9%. So we are continuing to work with government to campaign to ensure that solicitors get that bare minimum recommendation of 15% to ensure the viability, the sustainability of our justice system, our criminal justice system.
And that's critical, obviously, in terms of retaining that position as having that strong reputation. I felt it too, I should have said, as a serving sheriff in 2015-16 and a Lord Mayor of the City of London in 17-18, the real criticality of and the asset that we possess in terms of our rule of law.
Absolutely. And as I say, our judges, our courts are revered around the world for the fairness of their judgments, the independence of, their decisions and so forth. We are respected as a nation, one of our greatest exports around the world. But we must ensure that we have a justice system, as I say, worthy of its name, and that people will still want to come here and litigate, if you like.
Indeed, invested in and attracted for the younger generation. You've cemented yourself in our history with your achievement, becoming the first Black and the first person of colour as president of this extraordinary institution, the Law Society of England and Wales. Keen to understand how driven you are to continue advancing that representation in the law and ensuring that indeed that next generation that we referred to are more reflective of the communities that this organisation and others serve.
Absolutely. It is incumbent upon us all to leave the profession, in a better state than we found it for the next generation to come. And we must ensure that, through a number of programmes and initiatives, for instance, the Diversity Access Scheme that the Law Society supports. Over the last 10 years, we have funded over 200 places for individuals who come from a less disadvantaged background to be able to pursue a career in law, whereas perhaps for a number of reasons they may not have otherwise been able to do so. So that is a period of mentorship, work experience, and full funding for the legal practice course, or indeed now the solicitor's qualifying exam. We also run the Social Mobility Ambassadors Programme, where people will speak of those who've gone on to qualify as a solicitor will go into schools, colleges and so forth and workplaces and speak about their journey into the law. So there are a number of schemes going on to diversify the profession, but I have made it my mission, my intention to leave this profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered. And I'm clear that it must be a shared ambition with each and every one of us playing our part. This is a remarkable profession, a remarkable opportunity to serve as president. And I'm absolutely proud of the way that we have galvanised ourselves as a profession, the momentum behind discussing D&I and some of the initiatives that we have seen come out of this. But we must continue because whilst much has been done, there is so much more to do.
Stephanie, that is a wonderful answer, And it actually brings me probably to my final question. And it's one that I ask all our guests on off the agenda. Reflecting that we live in complex, challenging and difficult times where perhaps hope and aspiration are really needed in today's day. And I was keen to ask, what are the lines of support and encouragement and advice that you would give to that younger generation as they start out in their own career path?
Well, I've got a number of advice that I would give. It is incumbent upon us to ensure that we leave the profession in better shape than we found it for the next generation. So the advice that I would give is to never give up. Determination, resilience, perseverance, perhaps is how I would describe my journey to becoming president of the Law Society. But equally, we need to run our own race, write our own story. The cemeteries are filled with people whose dreams died with them. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to the world to never give up, to birth that dream if you have it. Otherwise, you'll watch someone else doing it. But ultimately, I absolutely believe that every door is open if you push. You persevere until something happens. I have made it my mission to leave this profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered. And I'm absolutely clear that it must be a shared ambition with each and every one of us playing our part. And I have been amazed and emboldened by the way we as a profession have galvanised ourselves in making a difference, to keeping the conversation going, but equally aware that whilst much has been done, there is a lot more to do.
Stephanie, what a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much. Never give up, be determined, show resilience, demonstrate that perseverance, and make sure that you narrate, write, and coordinate your own story. What a wonderful way to finish. Thank you so much for joining us on Off the Agenda today, for being our guest this afternoon. We wish you all the very best of luck with the coming final months as president of this extraordinary institution, and we wish you all the very best of luck ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a real honour and privilege to speak today with Stephanie Boyce, to hear her inspiring story and stories. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for listening. Well, that's all from me, other than to say, as always, stay tuned for more conversations, great discussions, and more inspirational guests. Thank you, and bye for now.